Greeting. Welcome to join us for the section on the static application security testing. We will review the section to cover for SAST with the ThunderScan. The product is being very robust and modern, that is being designed and become more and more popular in the most of the engagement that we have made. Some customers have been very happy with the robustness of the architecture that he can be able to deploy, even that is already container ready, where they save them a lot of time for future further migration on the technologies. So what we did, we will be covered on the latest change and the latest build on this, the ThunderScan, the product, the functionality, benefit. We also doing based on the walkthrough basics, and then also will be talking and cover you on the respective industry standard security control and the standard that it used to be addressing, and as a form of a compliance that you maybe want to know. So please enjoy the sections.
I believe that I give you enough for the warm up. It's time that we should focusing on the two main topic of today. So we're talking about the SAST with the ThunderScan. What I will do, I will give you a quite quick overview in case because some is new. You are missing some of the idea what this product is about. ThunderScan is for source code scanning, right? Some people call secure code review practice use case, but actually in the industry usually we're using the term called the SAST, the static application security testing tool, to referring to this type of product. ThunderScan, they have two versions right now. One version is ThunderScan. Another version is a ThunderScan Enterprise Edition. So what the differences is that the ThunderScan is usually will be operated in a single machine. Let's say your laptop, right? So you have everything inside there perform the scanning. The Enterprise version, most likely you will install in a server, or maybe it's a very high performing laptop. You will need to create the API access to integrate with a lot of different things to working in a single automation solution. Certain update later on I share with you what new, so you must see the thing. It may or may not be in a specific version. The reason why, like certain like API access those things in the like the ThunderScan's a single desktop version, right? It won't use those things. Of course, that you won't be able to access to all those new update enhancement. It is for the people to be automate the code inspection, and this is where the value that bring in. To have, let's say you have a billion and medium of source code you want to be scanning in a very short period of time, there is impossible for you to even giving a very experienced programmer, because it takes time for him to digest, and then to also based on his mood also, that today is good mood, maybe he has done more detailed review, but if he's not in the right mood, then it may be, that may not be systematic like the machine doing. Architectures-wise, it is a very classic client-server architecture. But of course, you can install in single box. I mean the single box with the both the element for the server and client element. The client element basically we talk about like the browser, like Chrome, because majority of people using Chrome nowadays. If you using the IDE like Visual Studio or other IDE software, yes, you will have a plugin for you to install that you can use to communicate with ThunderScan. So that is for the people, typically is a developer customer, they will be maybe will have this way of access. But you say security people, most likely I believe so, you will not do in this way for access. So At the same time, I see here that I talk about the API, right? The API command line interface for people to scripting and perform certain things with some script. So to be accessed to the engine and the database. For server part, I here also mentioned it is a standalone cross-platform. The cross-platform right now is Windows and all the major variants of the Linux version. So Ubuntu, SUSE, Red Hat, right? Or maybe the CentOS and the Debian major popular one using the REST API for the communications. The engine that it's talking about, it can be processing a very high volume of load. Depend on how many additional client instance that you access to perform the scanning needed for your network. Mongo, the or so-called NoSQL database, is by default will be installed. However, I can let you know for those enterprise database, it is supported as well like the Microsoft SQL. The reason why, because they have some enterprise customers, they always want to be standardizing their database. But of course, I think it's a commercial database. They will pay separately on top for keeping their data. The client side is more straightforward. Depending on your scenario, I call it as a scanning agent, horizontal for the horizontal scanning purpose. ThunderScan, as we know, one in the market that have able to support wide range of the languages, that from the traditional to very modern new feature and supported language. I will cover you in the roadmap after this few slides. List of the languages and framework more will come. Also, it's important for you to know what kind of the languages that you deal with. Is that it's already in the current list of the supported language or framework. If not, pay additional attention to the roadmap, what the new one we plan to be supported by this year in roughly when. Security scanner, of course, that we talk about with the extensive vulnerability tab that is being covered, that is already by default that to be able to support the reporting. Another area that people like to know about, because you are use those things for the purpose of generate the report, can be able to output in case for you need to integration or whatever with other tool or whatever reason to the HTML, PDF, XML, and JSON. Because XML and JSON nowadays quite commonly for people using it for, let's say, like import it further to the other tool, like for the SIEM or for the other two to be taken as an input to continue for some more complex enterprise workflow scenario. Report currently at this point of time, he support Defense Code report, the PCI DSS, well known as a payment card industry security standard, NIST for the US. OWASP top 10, you see that because the OWASP top 10 behind it always have the years one. And then for high trust and HIPAA, that is for the healthcare industry, CAPEC, and then the SANS top 25 already filled in, no extra effort is needed. In case you are for certain reason doing certain project for want to know for how your thing is being in comply or for certain reason, right? So you can generate those additional report in all those formats. Okay, another area is the CI/CD, or you so-called the DevOps integration. The list is keep growing now to see that your thing is inside there or not. If not, then maybe you can let me know. I can help you to feedback from specific thing you may interested to be in support as a customer. Source code we're talking, so that there are a few ways that you can passing for the source code. One of the most easier way is that you zip everything in the source code, then you just upload it into the engine. Enterprise, most likely for some company you are not ready to be putting in the cloud, right? So most likely will be your private cloud or whatever, yeah, you just upload into your own machine, then deploy. Zip, you will support zip, and then the other way of doing for your source code storage. It depends on your use case. Actually, the application is support for the multi-user role-based access controller, RBAC. Basically mean that you can create a different user group, all those user group with different read-write access right, and then you can assign some people inside to be simplify your user control. IDE, the integrated development environment that being supported will be Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code, Genbean IDE, and then for PHP Code, PyCharm, and Android Studio, and Clip. If your thing is not here, again, my advice is that you better tell me, right, so that I can help you to the input, because we quarterly have some input section to let them know that customer is start to using what tool. Because as a manufacturer, sometimes they do interested to prioritize their effort focusing on where majority of the paid customer will be using feature. LDAP integration, in case you are in the multi-user asset, if you say you are using laptop, of course this is no concern, but if you in the scenario have Active Directory, yes, it can be using for synchronize with your LDAP. You can enable the LDAP configuration, and then later on you mapping for the role from the ThunderScan role into respective ID. ThunderScan is support agent. This agent is scanning agent. For enterprise queue management, scanning by instant license, you feel not enough. You need to connect with more beyond, let's say, one of a single server. You need to distribute more to perform the scanning at the concurrently to reaching for more scanning speed or volume. ThunderScan support the horizontal scanning, more container or virtual machine set. Because the container, as you know, is much more make use of less footprint than the virtual machine. The way the whole world now is moving to reset out all the cloud, right? Actually, you will notice that majority of things is start to be container based rather than hosted having virtual machine, container ready for you. So you no need to think again on future. This type of technology, you need to be deploy the new one, new product or whatever is already container ready for you. Dashboard, of course, we talk dashboard. All this kind of a solution nowadays all come with the dashboard. Depend on the scanning that you've done it. Most likely, if you say it's a one-time scanning, you can just create a scan, then scanning does it. If you want to just remove it, if you continue to be here, it's fine. But for those applications that you want to compare from time to time, like the coming have subsequent new version, you want to have a keep track of a trend, then definitely you got to create, define as an application in still, then you perform multi different round of the scanning. Then you are getting the delta report like before and current, whether that they have a less vulnerability during the period of time or how. So this thing I walk through, so just know like now we'll do and group management. The system is allow you to create administrator role, scan management role, group scanning management, read only, group read only, scan initiate rule that you can create a ID for the user. Then you define what kind of role the person can do from the user login credentials to make it more flexible. And for bigger company, actually that they have a good role that you can use for even the greater separation of user permission multiplied by the different thing they can do. Let's say you are divided by the development, security, operation, right? So you can create a 3 different groups that really mapping to your actual UK scenario. Or maybe you see that we talk about you using LDAP, right? That for Active Directory. But this is all the feature is more again for more enterprise use case. But you say single box, you are the only one, then of course you no need to create so complex. But the feature to create a multi-user, multi-group feature is here. Mobile app testing. Some people now start doing for the mobile app testing from Apple, the IPA, and then for the Android, the APK, right, the mobile apps. From ThunderScan, we talk ThunderScan. As long as the mobile app that you plan to scan is developed based on the supported language and framework that I shared with you in the early, or like Submarine, right, the cross-platform. It will support for the standard application security testing because you are scanning the source. We know more and more people talking about the OSWAP Top 10 mobile app standard. For those who are serious mobile app OSWAP Top 10, you may need to download from the standard. What is the verification and checklist? Because certain things you may need to do, let's say that to configure the proxy access for your web scanner so that you can perform the pen testing from there to have a complete the whole standard. But you say to cover for the so-called ThunderScan, yes. But want to do something the dynamic thing here? No. You got to cover it as like using like the web scanner, manually testing, and then you write to the proxy. Another way that performing is to configure the mobile app to proxy its traffic while the web scanner. ThunderScan is not a web scanner, so that you may need to using the web scanner to cover that if this is a scope you want to do. But you say want to cover the source code is covered, but you say end-to-end to cover for pen testing, this is not what ThunderScan is designed to do. So it is for source code. You might understanding the scope different, even they're doing the same thing, but the area it covered is a bit different. Software composition analyst, the SCA, it is rising in interest from the ThunderScan. Good news, he had the feature for the dependency check. Basically, it's a software composition analyst. It needs a Java runtime to be installed in the same machine. Then he will perform to be calling to testing for those open source module that we're talking about. That you no need to buy for dedicated just to building you on the SCA for the open source, because the SCA mostly we are testing for open source view as a separate or AST testing toolkit. So you no need to additionally buy. If you say you need it, just the feature will be fit your need. GitHub Actions. This is something since 2020 September. It means it's around 6 months. Okay, that. ThunderScan is start to add the support for the static analysis result interchange format output upload by the ThunderScan GitHub action. That for the people who are currently using GitHub. So it means that if you have the ThunderScan, then you can make use of this action, the GitHub action that calling to using your ThunderScan to provide the scanning for you. Installation, just to let you know, the very minimum recommended is i7, the Intel i7 with 4 core. In the VM term, you need minimum 8 GB of memory, 2 GB free. It definitely is at least Windows 10, Server 2010 or higher, or even some more modern Linux distribution, like what I just told you, like SUSE, Red Hat, or even the Ubuntu or Debian. From some slightly old version like 2010, you may need to update the university runtime in Windows or the support for the Mongo database to run, for example, because there's a free database that is bundled in. But of course, if you want to run into the Microsoft SQL, let's say the pay database, right? Of course, that is long time ago already supported in the Windows, so no have those things need to be done. Supported browser is Microsoft Edge is because I'm just recently, I think you all know that is already surrendered. They say that they also parking under the Chromium, joining the force. So basically now it's just the Chromium, Firefox and Safari and the rest, where that the Chrome alone have 80% of market share. So it means the standard already defined from there. So even like from the reference code, the default web browser they built in is Chromium already, because it is more easy for a lot of people do the thing for like auto detection for some parameter. Let's say using like Webstrike, right, to be from the form to log in to extract all the parameter. You can done it with that instantly. Supported integration, like I just told you already, with some, okay, here talk about some specific version. Usually the latest the better lah, the support, because ongoing more people will be using. Licensing, it depends your scenario. If you say like the consultant, a pen tester, usually most likely you are using ThunderScan, single install developer machine, but of course like, you don't have API access because you don't need those things that you really do your thing. So that's why you install laptop or desktop. For enterprise, usually will be server, single server based on how many concurrent instance that you need. Remember, you recall I talked about the scanning agent, right? So that you want to cope with volume, API, and then also because since you set up a server, definitely you will be want to integrate it into the CI/CD DevOps integration and automation. At this point of time, if you are the customer, the latest release is 3.0.9.1. This version has some fit of course, it has some fit like the Amazon for certain things, because usually I will avoid all the existing customer. You got to read for what fix, what change, what anything, because they will be the portion for what as an existing customer mostly you want to know. All those things will be here. The scan template features, I was showing you. You can save this something to instant recall for the template that you're talking about. The summary, okay, this is the C# is for Android iOS. If you, because the company has been bought by Microsoft for quite some time for cross-platform, using this for C#. He also enabled the scan parent visibility chain, email support for notification. You mean the trigger the email, let's say the scan is complete to someone receive email, and then there is some of the fix from that have been carried out for bug fix, all those things. Like they say about like the ThunderScan agent raise condition roadmap for this years. Of course, roadmap mean future statement. So that's why that always they will carry some discriminant, because that they are the thing that planned at that time. But future the time, even they have some plan to do so, maybe change on the technology or certain plan on priority. Also, some of the items they may not be taking at the sequence they put into the roadmap, or maybe they will emulate it or they play with something else and so on. So that's why they always have this kind of thing. So you can see that from this year roadmap, they have something new language is want to be supported. The remain Scala. You can see the SQL support, deeper integration for the third-party tool. They have more third-party tool will be want to be in the integration list. Even furthermore, in the second half of the year, two-factor authentication eventually will rolling out at the quite end of this year's and email integration, organization-wide dashboard. Currently, the dashboard is the application-specific dashboard for application. It's not the organization-wide for everything. You may wait a while. Delta and on application view now have already, but it is not as retail to fulfill everyone's need at the moment. But the more further enhancement will be done in the second part of the years on the Delta on application view. Delta means that you want to compare the same application before and after. Just want to know for the differences of the Delta, or they call the differentiate portions, the kind of view. We continue the work to demo. Before I give you the slow and detailed one, but I will give you to see about the Bosco version first. I think about 5 minutes. We will quickly go through some of the features, because it saves me a lot of time. I can be just specifically focusing on some of the areas that we just talked. But you see the slide, but you won't understanding completely. So I spend those time with you on those instead.
This is a login screen to the ThunderScan SAST solution. Once we proceed with the login, we are presented with a dashboard that has several finished scans listed. The dashboard offers an easy way of scan management through scan searches, scan filtering by scan status, risk levels, sorting by any of the columns shown here, You can also delete the scans or stop any currently running scans. You can also immediately review the results of the scan through scan details or the summary of a scan. You can review the languages involved in any of the scans as they are shown in the dashboard. The dashboard also has an applications feature. Applications represent the grouping of scans for the purpose of scan history and delta. For example, in this application called test app here, we have a scan history of 2 scans. We can see the latest delta between those 2 scans. For example, there were 34 fixed vulnerabilities of high risk. There are 14 vulnerability types. In case some vulnerabilities were introduced, they would show as new, and these risks would also reflect that. We can see the languages involved in the project and the total number of scans against the application. Total vulnerabilities over time chart will pick up the last 20 scans and show all the ups and downs with introducing or mitigating vulnerabilities. The bar charts here will show compliance violations in the latest scan as well as the risks involved in the latest scan. From here we can also trigger a new scan against the application, as the application also stores all the configuration for the scan and the target data. For example, if this was a Git repository, triggering a new scan would reclone the repository and scan it and add it to the scan history. When creating a new scan, we have 3 configuration steps or options. The first one contains the following parameters. We can assign it a parent application. This is not a required parameter, but in order to have a scan history of a certain application, a scan should be assigned a parent application. We have a scan name and we have a language selection. A scan can be performed with multiple languages selected, or ThunderScan can automatically recognize all the languages in the project by using the auto language recognition option. We chose C# for this scan, and now we need to set the new target source. We have uploads, which are the zip archives of the source code. We have Git repositories, where you can specify a repository URL, be it the HTTPS or an SSH repository, doesn't matter. And we can also optionally specify a branch for the scan. We also have SVN, Team Foundation Server Version Control, Amazon S3 bucket objects, and local paths as scanning targets. We are going to select one of the already uploaded projects for this scan, and we can proceed to advanced options of the scan. The scan can be started with only the basic options set, but we are going to review the advanced options as well. On the left side here we can see all the vulnerability types that are supported for the analysis. We can choose to exclude any of these vulnerability types, and they won't be shown in final results or any of the exported reports. On the right side here we can see tracked input variables. Tracked input variables represent input sources, for example any function or a property that might take user input from some source, be it the HTTP request, a parameter, a command line argument, or a file path. We can add new tracked input variables, or we can exclude some of the default exposed ones here. On the bottom we have custom filtering functions and custom vulnerability rules. Custom filtering functions represent any function that might sanitize the user input in a non-standard way. For example, when mitigating cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, you can choose to encode the input during the output phase when reflecting it in the response by using default functions in languages such as default encoders, or you can write your own custom filtering functions that might for example, replace some special characters, and you should let ThunderScan know the name of that function and the type of a vulnerability that that function mitigates in order to avoid false positive results. We also have custom vulnerability rules. These represent function signatures for sync functions in frameworks that we might not support, where you can define a type of a vulnerability that function will cause if the parameters are passed unsanitized into its parameters. In the last options here, we can see the actual depth of the scan in terms of tracking the user input through function calls and variable copying. We can see that we can select any automatic issue submission triggers for Jira or Azure DevOps work items. We can choose to include filtered findings in the scan. For example, if the user input has passed through some filtering function, by default it won't be reported in the results, but we can choose to include those results. A deep input discovery option refers to a discovery of wrapped input functions that might be difficult to detect in some projects, and that option is selected by default to produce more results. Ignore stored false positive results represents an option to ignore any results that were marked false positives in previous scans over the same source code base. Once we start the scan, we are presented with a summary of the scan. The results will appear shortly. In the scan summary, we can see the total vulnerabilities that were found, the scanning duration, the total files or total lines that were analyzed in the scan, and we can also see all the vulnerability types that were found with counts for each of the vulnerability types. If we scroll down, we can also see any violations to compliance standards that are supported in ThunderScan with exact articles and counts of how many violations there are. If we proceed to the details of the scan, we can see here a language drop-down menu, which will, in case of multi-language scans, will show all the languages involved in the scan, and you can review the results per language instead of having them merged together in one tree view. By opening any of the vulnerability types, we can review individual vulnerabilities that are present for that type. In individual vulnerabilities, we have all the information such as the actual function that caused the vulnerability, how that function can be abused, in this case to perform a SQL injection attack. We can see what the input variable or the input source was, what was the sync file that caused the vulnerability, a vulnerability description, any violations under which that vulnerability might fall under, mitigation recommendations with references to external resources. We can also see a CWE entry for that vulnerability, which is clickable and leads to mitre.org definition of that CWE. We can choose to change the risk of the vulnerability. If we consider a certain individual vulnerability to be a different risk than what is reported, we can change it. We can also change the risks for the entire group of vulnerability. For example, for this SQL injection type, we can change the risk to medium if we want. At any point, vulnerability can be marked as a false positive result, and as previously shown, you can choose to exclude those results from future scans over the same source code base. From here, you can also submit a ticket to one of the supported issue tracking systems. If Jira or Azure DevOps are configured, all the Jira projects will be shown here with issue types, with an option for adding an additional comment to the ticket. The ticket will contain all the information necessary to track down and fix the vulnerability. To further analyze the vulnerability, we have a data flow of function calls and user input flow. By clicking on any of the items, we are led to the full source code highlighting. We can see that this vulnerability originated from the text email, text variable. We can see it was passed on further to the get security question and answer function as the email parameter, and we can see that that email parameter was used to concatenate to a string in an insecure manner without sanitization, and that SQL variable was finally passed on to the SQL data adapter function that caused the vulnerability. This explanation that I just gave is also available in the summary of that vulnerability. Summary represents a high-level description of the data flow, so we can see that the tainted input was received in line that and that, of file that and that, passed further on until it was finally passed unsanitized into a sensitive sync function that caused the high-risk SQL injection vulnerability. With creating reports, we have 4 available formats, which are HTML, PDF, XML, and JSON formats. For each of these formats, we have several report types, which are defense code, default format, and compliance formats such as OWASP Top 10, CW Top 25, NIST, PCI DSS, HIPAA, and High Trust. If we generate a defense code default form type in an HTML format, we can see all the results in the report. By clicking on any of the results, we can see all the details that we saw in the web user interface.
I hope the Bosco version is cover you in a very high level and quick one that what you may need to know about the product, how it functions. So this is the version, the latest version that we're talking about, 3.0.9. I think that I just want to highlight with you is just that the scan and application view, the one they're talking about. For those maybe ad hoc scan, yes, I think you can just execute it perform the scan here, because eventually you don't want to compare with something. But if you already have the intention to be compared, it maybe have another scanning on the features, right? It's best that for you to execute as the application that you, after you perform your first scan, the second scan or subsequently all scan like this one different version, right? So you can quick track it all here, give you the very graphical report on the thing. The one we say about the Delta just now, they say have further, you notice the roadmap we're talking, right? They have further Delta improvement. That means that they will be input something further from what you see from your currently you can do. So let me move back to the dashboard. So there is what else the thing that mostly people want to see, for instance, is the specific scan. If you say the scan, what you need is just a specific dashboard. You no need to do it on the application, because this one also will provide you the full detail of the thing that you want to be able to do your thing. That is based on even that, and below you notice that it will further filter for you based on some of the standard to filtering the result according to the standard that if you have mean is not okay. Doesn't mean that the more you have is more better. It's supposed to be 0 for all those categories, all those thinking. So this will be the particular thing just the Bosco is explain with you, and then to create and then the new feature you see on the latest build change, right? This is a 2 thing he's talking about, the chain parent application, change the scanning mapping into the different application, or maybe previously you scan, you accidentally mapping it into the wrong application, so that you can change it back accordingly to change group and so on. So this is some of the thing here. In terms of the operation, straightforward, because it's a very, we call it the result-based interface that is focusing on get the result. So you log in, scan, right? So okay, like you want this thing here, you got to create in the application here in still, right? Before you can grouping the thing with the name, all those thinking for this purpose. So just to be talk about particularly on the user management, we're talking about the group, right? This is what I mean by before only this one you can create additionally like additional that like you can plug the user into belong to here, then afterward then you define what the additional thing that you want to define that it can do, cannot do, and so on. So like here that we're talking about. So agent, if you have horizontal scanning instance thinking, then of course that you will have a lot of additional scanning thing from here for auditing purpose. They always have the log somewhere here that let's say that it talk about something for getting for certain reason. For additional thing like most of the integration, usually you are running on this particular setting here, zip, right? All those things you are set all from here, even you have an issue tracking system or API token. So this should be cover very quickly cover all the features that we are talking about on the ThunderScan.